The Washington Redskins. I don't need to lecture you about the reputation of their franchise under Dan Snyder. They were a shithole. A walking joke that nobody took seriously and everyone wanted to go away. Years upon years of embarrassment and scandal. Sheer neglect of franchise, stadium, and local relations, yet they felt they were winning off the field. The best way to emphasize that?
How would you describe the culture surrounding this football team?
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
It never gets old. The sheer arrogance of that comment. Everyone knew it was bullshit, and Bruce Allen's reasoning for it was the basic things that every team did. If you can even call it that. Digging further than rock bottom sapped fan interest and corporate support. A hotbed of cronyism and ego stroking. Dan fought tooth and nail to keep that franchise. He ran it into the ground, fostered an environment more toxic than Chernobyl, and drove Washington into a shit-filled sewer leak. That also happens to be FedEx Field. Every week was a different scandal or drama, and Dan's solution was to drag out Sean Taylor's corpse in some insanely half-assed tribute in poor taste. Or change the name of the team to something so bland and uninspired it led to more criticism. Or escape on a yacht for months on end to escape congressional inquiries. Even in his final hours, he would stomp his feet and beg to keep his abused baby until it was pried away by protective services. It would be the best thing to ever happen to that franchise. The Commanders over the last few years are a testament to a tried and true philosophy. Organizational success starts at the top, proving the benefits of even halfway competent ownership on the fortunes of a franchise. It's only been 2 years since the sale. For the commies, it's gone from a bloodbath to a red dawn. A land full of glories all their own. All you need to look at are three facets of the team: on-field performance, organizational culture, and off-field relationships. This was the challenge facing Josh Harris and his partners when they bought the team. For a $6 billion price tag, there was a lot of wreckage to sift through. Assessments and observations had to be made. See what worked, what didn't, and what just needed to be demolished and rebuilt. Harris does have experience in sports. He owns the Philadelphia 76ers and New Jersey Devils as well. One thing he's done to the benefit of his teams is allowed the executives to do their jobs without interference. For better or worse. In the case of the Sixers, that might have been a completely botched disaster from the moment the process started. The Devils have fared a little bit better than them in that time frame. Just a little. It should be noted that Harris isn't even considered to be one of the better owners of the NHL or NBA, yet that doesn't matter. The bar was so insanely low that a wooden twig would have been a vast improvement. But enough for anyone. First aspect, on-field performance. The Redskins/football team/commies under Dan Snyder, horrible. A wasteland of burned money on free agents, changing philosophies on a whim and doing everything his way. Spoiler, his way led to frequent disaster. Damage was so widespread that all of 2023 was merely a cleanup year. Sitting around as Mike Shanahan 2.0 was revealed to be long past his expiration date as a coach. The geriatric defensive minds of him and Jack Del Rio showing that they were stuck in 2008, which was somehow more modern than Dan's thinking was. The worst defense in football with an offense that wasn't much better. As a result, guys like Montez Sweat and Chase Young were on the way out. Sam Howell looked like the future for a few months, then he outright imploded and threw his way out of town. Probably with a terrible interception. There were some interesting pieces on the offensive side of the ball, mainly Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin carrying anything resembling competence, but the rest was a mess. They needed a full-scale operation to come anywhere close to a playoff contender. Reality tends to be a bit less predictable in that regard.
With the second pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders select Jaden Daniels, quarterback, LSU.
It tends to happen when you select a franchise quarterback who adapts to the league off the bat. With this LSU product, they didn't just hit a home run, it was a walk-off grand slam. When the words best rookie QB in NFL history are uttered, you know a special player's in their midst. An accurate rocket arm with elusiveness and speed to boot. You talk about your Jalen Hurts? The commies have their own right here. Minus the squatting 600 pounds part. Could Hurts complete 70% of his passes as a rookie, though? Can he near single-handedly transform the offense from an afterthought into a machine? Allowing Robinson, Jahan Dotson, and McLaurin to make magic happen? It led to Washington's best season in a very, very long time. 12 wins for the first time since 1991. I'd say that was a good year for the Redskins back then. And it'd only get even better for them in January. Tampa Bay would be a very tough opponent in the wild card. Coming off a strong finish with talent aplenty, but did have some injuries in the secondary. The game would be tight to the very end. And things seemed perilous. You know what changes things? The Bucs falling on their own sword. And Jaden Daniels. And the defense holding their own. And Jaden Daniels again. The lesser talented quarterback would have had more than his towel stripped here. A total team effort with a touch of luck added in. Their first playoff win in almost 20 years. Then the true miracle. They humiliated the number 1 seed Lions in their own house the very next week. A team that overhauled their own culture issues in one fell swoop. A statement win. In one try, the Commies experienced more playoff success than Dan Snyder had in his 24 years of ownership. It's fucking hilarious. Washington's magic may have run out against an Eagles machine, but it'll remain a season eternally etched in legend. Breaking free of the shackles of misery. Even if for a moment Washington experienced joy again. And that alone makes it beautiful. Next, you get to the organizational culture. Making it as far as they did was the result of not just fresh talent, but personnel changes. To be a proper owner, you can't only let people do their jobs, you must choose the right ones to lead the charge. If you don't, you just become Shot Kai. No one wants that. Before the sale, Dan Snyder was going through his Mike Shanahan 2.0 stint as mentioned earlier. Ron Rivera's head honcho was not working. At all. Time to go off the pasture, buddy. Martin Mayhew isn't a true problem, but he can go upstairs before he rides off into the sunset. A new era needs fresh thinking. And for their next GM, look to San Francisco and the forward-thinking individuals developed there. Adam Peters will be their visionary for the future. He was blocked by John Lynch, but Washington would give him the promotion that he so desired. Washington bringing in top executive prospects instead of letting them go. Crazy thought. At head coach, they chose a rather safe high-floor bet. Ben Johnson wouldn't come, so in the end they settle on Dan Quinn? Look, he had some damn good defenses in Dallas, but with how his tenure in Atlanta ended, all the choking his teams did over there, it looked like a lateral move from a sunken riverboat at first glance. But Washington ponied up and offered him strong coordinators to shore up weaknesses. Enter Cliff Kingsbury. He may have been completely unqualified to be a head coach in the NFL, but offensive coordinator better suits his strengths. What he's been able to do with a dynamic quarterback in Daniels, I'd say that move's worked out for now. Quinn brought a lot of players and personnel with him from Dallas. Longtime assistant of his, Joe Wade Jr., promoted to defensive coordinator. Plus a number of Cowboys free agents looking for a pay raise. Set the tone for the culture and let the play on the field do the rest. Once again, the bar was so low with Rivera's lost start that Quinn's been an absolute godsend. Has he really been the best coach they've had since Joe Gibbs in only 1 year? Has to be at least Mike Shanahan here, right? I'd say those moves have worked out well for the short term. Then finally we get to the sweetest part. Off-field relationships. Building the trust between a team and local politicians and fans is paramount to any sort of success. Dan Snyder was good at one thing and it was burning every bridge he came across. This was especially true with the fan base. Turns out that squeezing as many dollars as he could out of them while putting out a shitty product tends to ruin a team's reputation. Now this situation will take years of recovery. And a true assessment of it isn't available at this time. But a deep playoff run tends to help with that. There's gonna be that fear that things will go back to the way things were, but that's normal. Some Lions fans still deal with the same thing with their overhaul. But the team still felt out of place. Being in Maryland and the stadium completely falling apart due to neglect was a demerit. Trying to move to land in Northern Virginia felt the same way. They needed to be back in DC proper. Returning to that hallowed ground was Dan's dream for time eternal. And thanks to the strange concept of negotiating in good faith, the local government and team not only came to an agreement for a new stadium, but it will be built where the hallowed remains of RFK Stadium currently stand. A $3.7 billion shrine that'll become the envy of the area. $1 billion in public funds for infrastructure upgrades. The lack of a toxic air plus that deep playoff run finally got them more than they bargained for. Sad thing is, it's not even the worst stadium deal I've seen for taxpayers. The commies are at least paying for any cost overruns. Once complete, it'll be a dome that'll bear host to future Super Bowls, major concerts, possibly March Madness. The DC Metro's even going to be hosting the NFL Draft in 2027. A massive boon to any local economy. And a celebration of a new era of Washington football. Over 1 million fans flocking to culminate a revival to competency. Commanding the political landscape, conquering past reputations. The thing is, this ownership group isn't even going above and beyond the Call of Duty. They're just being average owners of an average team. That's how bad things were under Dan Snyder. Him merely being out of the picture has improved the health of the organization in all facets exponentially. It's the greatest ending for anyone who loves football. Danny sitting alone in a London apartment drinking scotch out of bitterness. Stewing to anyone within earshot about how unfair things were. In less than 2 years, Washington has accomplished everything Dan wanted out of his team without even trying. They had the playoff run he fancied. They got the new stadium he was whining for ages about. They're starting to bask in the glory, adulation, and respect that Dan envisioned for himself. Sean Taylor's gonna be getting a real tribute worthy of his name. It's a Wonderful Life if Mr. Potter was beaten with billy clubs in the end. You wanted to do so too after that movie, don't lie. The only way to stick it to him further would be changing the team name back to Redskins. You can only dream about that, unfortunately. Regardless, former Redskins and current Kami fans alike hold hands and celebrate in joy. Their team finally has legitimate hope. They have some semblance of a real future. The ominous black cloud over their franchise is dissipating. A workplace without scandals popping up every month. If their winning ways on the field can be sustained isn't certain, but with someone like Jaden Daniels leading the way, there's a good chance they'll be back in the playoffs again. Probably repeatedly. Now they get weapons to add to the arsenal. Deebo Samuel on a hopeful return to form. Laramie Tunsil is an elite blindside blocker for Jaden. Javon Kinlaw at $15 million a year? Okay then. I once said that Snyder was never going to release his death grip on the team. That he'd have that franchise to run into the ground for decades to come, even with the repeated black eyes he gave to the organization. I've never been so glad to have been wrong. This ownership group is still in its infancy, yet everything is within their grasp. Early returns haven't just been good, they've been a godsend. As a wise man said, he who commands the future conquers the past. With time, Dan Snyder's reign will be a forgotten footnote to history and snarky YouTube videos. But with this group, perhaps the culture will actually become damn good.
Here comes the Hail Mary with the game on the line. And the ball is caught! Caught! It's a miracle! It's Noah Brown! Oh my goodness! This town is going crazy! It's a madhouse in Landover, Maryland!
He did it!